everyone. We're jumping into episode 54.
54 already.
I know, right?
It's amazing.
Time flies.
It really does. So this time we're looking at lessons 16 through 20 from A Course in Miracles. So what's the overarching theme of these lessons we're going to be reviewing today?
Well, they all kind of revolve around this idea of perception and how we're not just watching the world go by.
We're in it.
We're actively creating it through our thoughts, our perceptions.
Our choices.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's a good lead-in to lesson 16.
I have no neutral thoughts.
That's 16.
Right. Then 17, I see no neutral things. 18, I am not alone in experiencing the effects of my seeing.
Getting deeper.
Yeah. And then 19, I am not alone in experiencing the effects of my thoughts.
Powerful stuff.
And finally, I am determined to see.
That's a good one to end on.
And today,
Yeah.
we're going to be taking a look at some of the questions that you've sent in.
Yeah.
Let's jump into the first question.
Sounds good.
Lesson 16 says, I have no neutral thoughts. Neutral thoughts are impossible because all thoughts have power. They will either make a false world or lead me to the real one. But thoughts cannot be without effects.
Right.
As the world I see arises from my thinking errors, so will the real world rise before my eyes as I let my errors be corrected.
Makes sense.
My thoughts cannot be neither true nor false. They must be one or the other. What I see shows me which they are.
Okay.
So with that as our foundation,
Yeah.
let's jump into the first question.
Sounds good.
This one comes from a listener who says, I understand that thoughts have power, but how can I possibly control all my thoughts?
Right.
They seem to just pop into my head.
Yeah, I think that this question really gets at something that a lot of people have difficulty with when they start to work with the course. While we might not be able to control those initial thoughts that pop into our minds, we do have the power to choose which ones we engage with
Okay.
and which ones we let go of.
So it's kind of like with television. We have all these channels, we have all these programs available, but we get to decide what we want to watch.
Yeah, and the final point I wanted to bring up about this is the idea of shifting identification.
Shifting identification.
The Course teaches that we're not our thoughts. We're the observer of our thoughts. We're not the voice in our heads. We're the silent awareness that can witness that voice.
This kind of reminds me of some of the practices of meditation where you're encouraged to separate yourself from your thoughts and connect with that stillness within.
And by recognizing that we're not our thoughts, that can create a space of peace and freedom.
Okay.
And we can watch those thoughts come and go
Yeah.
without being swept away by them.
Makes sense. Let's take a look at the second question now. What does it mean for a thought to be true or false?
The Course uses the terms true and false
Yep.
a little differently than we might in everyday life. So it's not about true or false in terms of like information or facts. We should be thinking about true and false in terms of whether the thought is rooted in love or in fear.
So let's talk about the two types of thoughts that the answer to this question describes.
Okay.
True thoughts. True thoughts are those thoughts that are aligned with love,
Okay.
with oneness, with connection, and they lead to feelings of peace and joy and forgiveness.
And that would naturally lead to us acting and behaving in ways that are helpful and supportive to others.
On the other hand, there are what the Course calls false thoughts. And these are the thoughts that are rooted in fear,
Okay.
in separation, in judgment.
Okay.
And those kinds of thoughts tend to manifest as guilt or anger, resentment, anxiety. So they separate us. They make us feel alone and isolated from each other, and maybe even from a sense of something bigger than ourselves.
And the answer to this question emphasizes a really important point.
Okay.
The only truly true thought is the thought of love itself. And it brings up another question from one of our listeners.
Okay.
This listener asks, if the world I see is based on my thinking, how can I be sure that I'm not just making up a better illusion? Is it possible to know what's really real?
Wow, that's a question that goes really deep
It really gets into the nature of reality.
and something that the Course explores in depth.
Definitely.
So what does the Course say about this?
Well, the Course suggests that the world we see with our senses is like a projection of our minds, shaped by our beliefs,
Yeah.
thoughts.
So each of us is basically experiencing a personalized version of reality.
That's right. Filtered through the lens of our own experiences.
So like those fear-based thoughts we were talking about earlier, those would create a world that's filled with suffering and separation.
Exactly.
And thoughts that are rooted in love would manifest a world of peace and joy and connection.
But there's something really important to remember here.
Okay, what's that?
The Course emphasizes that true reality goes beyond our perceptions. It's not something that we can grasp with our five senses or even with our intellect.
Oh, so it's not about creating a better illusion, but about moving beyond the illusion altogether.
That's the idea.
Okay.
The Course is pointing us towards an experience of reality that's based on love
Yeah.
and unity and the awareness that we are all interconnected.
That makes me think of the idea of awakening or enlightenment that you find in so many spiritual traditions. They're all talking about a shift in consciousness, a recognition that there's a deeper reality beyond our everyday perceptions.
There are definitely some parallels there.
I see no neutral things. What I see witnesses to what I think. It is impossible to see nothing because it is impossible not to think. If I did not think, I would not exist, because being is thought. Let me look on the world I see as the representation of my own state of mind. I know that my state of mind can change, and so I also know the world I see can change as well. This lesson really gets you thinking, right? One listener wrote in and asked, if I see no neutral things, doesn't that mean I'm constantly judging everything as either good or bad?
Well, this question brings up a very important distinction. The Course, it differentiates between judgment, which stems from the ego, and awareness, which is our goal here.
Okay, I see how that could be confusing. So how does the Course define judgment differently than awareness?
Well, the ego uses judgment to label and separate and condemn. It reinforces this idea of duality. This is good, that is bad. Whereas awareness simply acknowledges that our minds assign meaning, not that things themselves are inherently good or bad.
So it's about understanding that we are the ones adding that layer of meaning. It's not about denying our reactions, but recognizing their source.
It is about taking responsibility for our perception. Take, for example, two people observing a storm cloud. One might think, ugh, this is going to ruin my picnic, while the other might think, amazing, this will nourish the garden. The storm cloud itself is neutral. It's the meaning each person brings to the experience. The liberating thing is that once we understand this power, we have to assign meaning. We realize we can choose different meanings. Our reactions aren't fixed.
So instead of pretending that everyone sees that storm cloud the same way, we can understand that our interpretation determines how it affects us.
The more we become aware of our interpretations and choose those aligned with peace and love, the more our experience of the world will reflect that it is an ongoing process, not a destination.
This really makes you consider the implications for how we experience life. If everything we see is a reflection of our own mind, what does that tell us about our ability to change our experience of the world?
It tells us that we possess immense power, far more than we typically realize. This power doesn't lie in, manipulating external factors, but in choosing how we internally respond to them.
We're going to be looking at lesson 18, specifically that idea of private thoughts. It's a concept that can really make you think. And to get us started, let's actually hear lesson 18 itself straight from the source.
Okay.
I am not alone in experiencing the effects of my seeing. If I have no private thoughts, I cannot see a private world. Even the mad idea of separation had to be shared before it could form the basis of the world I see. Yet that sharing was a sharing of nothing. I can also call upon my real thoughts, which share everything with everyone. As my thoughts of separation call to the separation thoughts of others, so my real thoughts awaken the real thoughts in them. And the world my real thoughts show me will dawn on their side as well.
So much packed into those few sentences.
Yeah.
What are your initial thoughts on this from your perspective?
Well, it's such a powerful lesson, because it really flips our usual way of thinking about thoughts on its head.
Yeah. We tend to think about them as intensely personal, locked away inside our minds.
Yeah.
But A Course in Miracles suggests that our thoughts might not be as private as we believe.
It does make you wonder what private even means in this context.
Right.
Is it saying that someone could literally read my mind? Or is there like a deeper meaning here?
Yeah, it's not saying that we have zero privacy in our thoughts,
Right.
or that somebody can just tune in and hear everything going on in our heads.
Right.
The lesson is pointing to something a little more subtle,
Okay.
a shared energy or a common ground beneath the surface of our individual thoughts. Think about those times when you've felt a strong connection with someone, sensing their emotions or, finishing their sentences.
Yeah.
That shared experience hints at the interconnectedness that A Course in Miracles is getting at.
It makes you wonder, if we're not as mentally isolated as we think,
Right?
how much are we influencing each other with our thoughts?
Yeah.
Is this something we should be worried about? Could negative thoughts from others be like infecting our own minds?
That's a very natural concern.
Yeah.
And it leads us right into the heart of the one mind concept from A Course in Miracles.
Okay.
Imagine an ocean on the surface. You have, countless waves, each seemingly separate and distinct.
Right.
But beneath those waves, there's one vast body of water connecting them all.
Okay.
A Course in Miracles suggests our minds are like those waves appearing individual on the surface, but ultimately part of a single unified consciousness.
This one mind concept is so intriguing.
Yeah.
If we're all interconnected in this way, what happens to the idea of individual responsibility?
Right.
Does it even make sense if our thoughts are constantly influencing and being influenced by others?
A Course in Miracles doesn't imply that we're puppets controlled by a collective mind,
Okay.
nor does it dismiss the significance of personal choice.
Right.
It's more about recognizing the impact our individual thoughts have on the whole. Just as each wave contributes to the ocean's overall state, our choices matter because they influence the energy of the one mind.
Okay.
We're participating in something larger than ourselves.
So we are responsible for our thoughts, but also aware that they kind of have an impact beyond ourselves.
Right.
It's a tricky balance to navigate. So
Yeah.
where does this idea of private thoughts fit into this then? If there's this one mind we're all contributing to, does that mean our most personal inner thoughts are somehow broadcast out into the world?
That's a key question. A Course in Miracles isn't saying our thoughts are on a public loudspeaker for everyone to hear.
Okay.
It's more about the underlying energy behind them.
Right.
Remember, it talks about real thoughts, which are shared, and thoughts of separation, which give us the illusion of a private world. It's about recognizing that what we perceive as private is still shaping the collective energy field,
Yeah.
Whether we're conscious of it or not.
If even our private thoughts have this impact on the collective, how do we reconcile that with our individual journey of growth and healing? Does focusing on personal change still matter if we're all swimming in this one mind?
A Course in Miracles emphasizes both individual and collective transformation.
Okay.
Working on our own inner world is essential because our individual healing ripples out into the collective consciousness.
Right.
As we shed limiting beliefs and embrace thoughts of love and forgiveness, we contribute to a more harmonious whole.
This makes me think about, how we react to challenging situations or negative emotions.
Right.
If our thoughts are interconnected, how do we avoid getting swept up in the negativity of others?
Yeah.
Or even contributing to it unintentionally?
Of course, in Miracles acknowledges that we encounter negativity in this world, but it encourages us to approach those encounters with a different mindset.
Okay.
When we encounter negativity, whether it's directed at us or we simply witness it,
Right.
we have a choice. We can choose to respond with understanding, compassion, and forgiveness.
How can we realistically cultivate that kind of response? Especially when our natural inclination might be to protect ourselves or fight back.
It's not about suppressing our emotions
Okay.
or pretending everything is fine when it's not.
Right.
A Course in Miracles actually encourages honesty about our feelings.
Okay.
But it also reminds us that beneath those surface level reactions, we have access to a deeper wellspring of love and peace. It's about choosing to tap into that inner strength, even when it feels challenging.
But doesn't choosing love and forgiveness kind of make us vulnerable? Especially in a world where people can take advantage of kindness?
It's natural to have those concerns, but
Yeah.
A Course in Miracles teaches that true strength doesn't lie in defensiveness or retaliation,
Okay.
but in the willingness to choose love, even when we feel afraid. Forgiveness in the context of A Course in Miracles doesn't mean condoning hurtful actions.
Right.
It's about releasing the resentment and pain that bind us to negativity, freeing ourselves to experience the peace that lies beyond the ego's defenses.
So forgiveness is more about an inner shift than about changing the other person.
Precisely, when we forgive, we're not saying that what happened was okay.
Right.
But we're choosing to break free from the negativity it created within us.
Right. By choosing forgiveness, we are not only shifting our own internal state,
Yeah.
but also contributing to a more peaceful collective consciousness. It's both humbling and empowering to realize that we have that kind of influence.
Yeah.
That our choices, even our most private thoughts and feelings, are part of something much larger than ourselves.
It is. A Course in Miracles reminds us that we're not isolated individuals, but interconnected beings co-creating our reality through the power of our thoughts.
Right.
It invites us to awaken to this truth and choose thoughts that align with love, forgiveness, and understanding, knowing that those choices contribute to the healing of ourselves and the world around us.
Does that suggest we have a responsibility to help others awaken to this interconnectedness?
A Course in Miracles emphasizes that the most powerful way to help others is to focus on our own spiritual growth.
Okay.
As we heal our own minds and align with love,
Right.
we become a beacon of light for others,
Right.
naturally inspiring them to do the same.
Okay. I am not alone in experiencing the effects of my thoughts. I am alone in nothing. Everything I think or say or do touches all the universe. A son of God cannot think or speak or act in vain. He cannot be alone in anything. It is therefore in my power to change every mind along with mine, for mine is the power of God.
Wow.
It's lesson 19. Even reading it now, it's easy to see how this lesson can spark a lot of questions and even honestly some skepticism.
Yeah.
The idea that our thoughts have this like universal impact, can feel pretty overwhelming.
Right.
And let's be honest, that phrase, the power of God,
Oh, yeah.
that can bring up some strong feelings for folks.
Yeah, for sure.
Luckily, we have 2 listener questions that dive right into the heart of this lesson.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, the first question is about that very phrase. Our listener writes, "Mine is the power of God. How can I claim such a thing? Isn't that blasphemous or even arrogant?"
The language of A Course in Miracles is powerful and meant to be transformative, but it can also be easy to misinterpret when taken out of context. If we understand power in the traditional sense as dominance or control over others, then yes, claiming the power of God sounds egotistical.
Sure.
But the Course invites us to reconsider what we mean by power.
Okay.
It distinguishes between the ego's idea of power,
Wait.
which is based on fear, separation, and the need to control, and the true power that comes from recognizing our unity with God and with each other. This power is rooted in love, forgiveness, and a willingness to let go of our judgments.
So it's not about forcing our will on the world,
Right.
but about aligning ourselves with the power that already exists.
Precisely. It's a power of being, not doing. It's a reminder that we are all extensions of the same divine source and that we share in that inherent power. It's not something we have to earn or fight for.
Right.
It's already present within us, waiting to be recognized and expressed through our thoughts, words, and actions.
This makes me think about the second question,
Okay.
which grapples with the flip side of that power. If my thoughts affect everyone, doesn't that put an enormous amount of pressure and responsibility on me?
Oh, yeah.
What if I have negative thoughts?
This is a common concern,
Yeah.
and it's understandable. The idea that our thoughts have this universal impact can feel both exhilarating and terrifying.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that while the Course emphasizes the power of our minds, it also assures us that we're not alone in this. We're all contributing to a collective consciousness.
This is more of a shared responsibility than a solo mission.
Yes, you're responsible for your own thoughts and actions.
Right.
But you're not solely responsible for the entire universe's vibrational frequency.
Okay.
The key is to focus on what you can control, which is your own mind. By choosing thoughts of love, forgiveness, and understanding, you're not only shifting your own consciousness, but also contributing to a positive shift in the collective consciousness.
That makes me feel a bit better.
Good.
But what about those inevitable negative thoughts that pop up?
Sure.
I mean, we all have them from time to time, right?
Of course, having negative thoughts is part of being human. It's what we do with those thoughts that matters.
Right.
Of course, in Miracles doesn't condemn us for experiencing negative emotions or thoughts.
Okay.
Instead, it encourages us to become aware of them without judgment.
Okay.
Notice them, acknowledge them, and then choose a different response.
So rather than trying to suppress or deny those negative thoughts,
Yeah.
we should try to observe them with a sense of detachment.
That's the idea. It's about shifting from a place of fear and reactivity to a place of awareness and choice.
Oh.
When a negative thought arises, you can choose to let it go, to forgive yourself for having it, and to focus on a more positive thought instead.
This makes me think about how often we get caught in a cycle of guilt and self-recrimination when we have those negative thoughts.
Oh, yeah.
It's like we punish ourselves for not being good enough.
The Course reminds us that we are all inherently worthy of love and forgiveness, regardless of our thoughts or actions. This doesn't mean we condone harmful behavior.
Right.
It simply means we recognize that everyone is capable of making mistakes, and that true growth comes from choosing a more loving path.
So forgiveness is key here, both for ourselves and for others.
It is Forgiveness is one of the most powerful tools we have for dismantling the ego's grip on our minds.
So you've gotten to lesson 20.
Right.
So it says, I am determined to see.
Okay.
Recognizing the shared nature of my thoughts, I am determined to see. I will look upon the witnesses that show me the thinking of the world has been changed. I will behold the proof that what has been done through me has enabled love to replace fear, laughter, to replace weeping, and abundance to replace loss.
Okay.
I would look upon the real world and let it teach me that my will and the will of God are one. So we got a couple questions about this lesson I thought we could dive into a little bit.
Let's do it.
The first one says, if I'm determined to see, why do I still struggle with fear, doubt, and negative perceptions? And I thought that was really interesting because, when you read these lessons,
Right.
you're like, oh, okay. I'm going to have this different perspective now. And then you realize, I'm still struggling with the same things.
You're a human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it seems like the Course acknowledges this is a common experience.
It does.
And it offers some insight into why those struggles might persist.
Yes.
One of the key factors that it points to is this idea of the ego's resistance to change.
Sure.
Which is that part of us that really likes to hold on to those, fear and separation and kind of those negative patterns that keep us feeling stuck.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Because the ego thrives on that.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to move into a place of, love and connection and oneness, then the ego is going to feel threatened.
Yeah, it's like this little saboteur inside
Yeah.
that's constantly whispering doubts and fears and trying to pull us back into that, that comfortable space of negativity.
Totally. And that's why it's so important to be aware of it
Yeah.
so that we can start to recognize those voices and choose not to listen to them.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's not like a light switch.
No.
You can't just flip it on and be like, okay, I'm a different person now.
Right.
Which actually reminds me of the second question.
Just,
And the listener asked the lesson, mentions love replacing fear, laughter replacing weeping, and abundance replacing loss. How can I see evidence of this in a world that seems filled with suffering?
such a great question.
Yeah. And it kind of highlights that tension that I think a lot of us feel
For sure.
between the Course's message
Yes.
and the reality of, suffering that we see all around us.
Absolutely.
It's like we're being told to see the world bathed in sunlight when it feels like we're standing in the middle of a storm.
Right. And the Course addresses this by distinguishing between two worlds.
Okay.
The world of perception,
Okay.
the real world.
Got it.
So the world of perception is the world that we see through our ego's lens.
Okay.
It's the world of fear and separation and lack.
So it's not about denying that suffering exists or pretending that everything is perfect.
No, not at all. It's about recognizing that our perception is not always accurate.
Okay.
The real world, as the Course describes it, is a realm of unity and love and abundance.
So how do we start to see that? How do we shift our perception to align with that?
Well, the Course emphasizes that the transformation starts within.
Okay.
It's not about changing the external world first. It's about changing our inner landscape.
And so the initial evidence of that shift might be more of an internal experience.
It often is. We might experience more peace, more joy, a deeper sense of connection. And as we continue to practice, we begin to see glimpses of this transformation
Yeah.
reflected in the external world as well.
Like, what might those glimpses look like?
Well, sometimes it's the small, everyday moments where we see love replacing fear.
Okay.
It might be witnessing an act of kindness, extending forgiveness to someone who has wronged us,
Yeah.
or observing the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity.
So it's about recognizing those moments where love kind of breaks through,
It is.
even amidst all the darkness.
Exactly.
And it's also important to remember that the Course's concept of abundance goes beyond material wealth.
Oh, absolutely. It's about recognizing the abundance of love and joy and peace that's available when we release our grip on fear and scarcity.
So we're not necessarily looking for some grand external validation
All right.
that the world has magically transformed,
No.
but we're paying attention to those subtle shifts
Yeah.
within ourselves and in the world around us.
Right. Those are the signs.
Yeah.
That our perception is changing.
Yeah.
And we're starting to see the real world.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. It's really interesting when the lesson talks about looking upon the real world,
Yeah.
because sometimes I wonder, what does that even mean?
Right.
Because It says, I would look upon the real world and let it teach me that my will and the will of God are one. And it almost seems like it's implying that there's this separate reality
Yeah.
that we need to somehow escape to.
Yeah, I think that can be a common misunderstanding.
Yeah.
But the Course isn't suggesting that we detach from the world or deny our human experience.
Okay.
It's more about recognizing that the world we perceive
Yeah.
is often filtered through our own thoughts and beliefs and judgments.
Right?
And that can create a distorted view.
So the real world isn't like a physical place that we go to?
No, it's not about escaping to some mystical realm.
Okay.
It's about seeing the world we already inhabit,
Yeah.
but through a clearer lens.
Okay.
A lens of love and forgiveness.
That makes more sense. Well, this has been such a rich conversation. I'm so grateful for your insights.
Oh, it's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you.
Yeah, it's really helped to deepen my understanding of these concepts.
The beauty of A Course in Miracles is that it invites us to keep questioning, keep practicing,
Yeah.
and keep opening ourselves up to new understanding.
That's so true. And so as we wrap up this exploration,
Yeah,
I think it's important to remember that these teachings are really meant to be lived,
they are.
not just studied.
Action is key.
Yeah, the real transformation happens when we take these principles off the page
Absolutely.
and we integrate them into our daily interactions, our choices, our relationships.
That's where the magic happens.
Thank you so much for joining us on this journey of exploring. May you find peace, clarity, and a deepening connection to the love that surrounds us all.
I woke up to a miracle today.